greet everybody and thank everybody for coming. And I do appreciate it. This is great seeing everybody and that kind of stuff. And I know I was going to say one or two other things. I did want to tell y'all that the email promised some of Fred's favorite music, and then I suddenly thought, well, how can I tell what his favorites were? So I just thought of concerts that he and I had been to where he was real enthusiastic enough to buy a CD. And then I took pieces from those to make the playlist. I hope everybody enjoyed the slideshow. Who was that guy that looked a whole lot like Fred except with hair and it wasn't gray? That's what I'm still trying to figure out. So how we're going to do this, though, is we're going to take just a few more than half of the people that signed up to read. We're going to do those and then take about a 10-minute break, because some of us can't make it all the way through something like this without a 10-minute break. And then we're going to come back and we're going to have a video that Emily Rainey sent in, and another one from Maggie Yu, who lives in South Korea. And then you guys will hear the most long-winded speaker out of the whole group coming after that, and we don't know who that is. Okay, David, are you in town?
Yes.
Okay. Let me introduce, for those of you who don't know, David is Fred and Diane's son, and he's got a song that he wrote specifically for this, and he's going to do that first.
Well, I'm just going to read it first.
Was that? Do the reading first? Okay, mighty good. All right, well, I'm going to get out of your way. And come on down.
Thank you, Kurt. Afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for coming out. I know so many folks in this room. I can't remember all the names. I saw Seth walking. I was like, Seth. Yeah, that's it. I hadn't seen you since I was 8. So theater and park. But yeah, I'm glad we all did this. So I wrote a little something, and then I wrote a song for both of them a couple months back, that I'll do today as well. So, I remember Fred. I remember Dad. Donald Frederick Corlett, Jr. I must have been in middle school by the time I learned his name was Donald. He was always Fred to me and anyone else he knew. And I believe he is with us here today. He loved burning coal. There are so many memories, but sadly not enough. But I remember him taking me to school every day, and weekend events at the church, seeing if you could hold your breath the whole way over Holden Beach Bridge. I remember softball games with the church league. Dad was always the umpire. I remember rehearsals. So many. I met Evan Rachel Wood when I was 9, as Dad was in a production of The Miracle Worker at Theater and Park. I soon developed a knack for auditory memory and would run lines with him on the way to the theater, especially once the off-book deadline would come. Of course, I caught the theater bug. My first show was directed by Dad when I was 8. That was the first time I met community theater heavyweights Kurt Benrud and David Henderson. Dad and I were in a production of Briar Patch, The Diary of Anne Frank, The Man Who Came to Dinner. But the most fun I had with him was when we were both extras in the film Patch Adams, shot on campus at UNC. He was in multiple scenes, but he and I were in the graduation scene at the end. He met Robin Williams and talked with him on several occasions in between filming. Dad loved going to the movies. Back when you had to check the movie times in the newspaper, we would plot out 2 or 3 new releases to see on a Friday evening. Fred was one of the most honest human beings, but had no problem sneaking into the next theater. Provided we were buying those high-dollar concessions. Yes, he had his rebellious moments. I remember when I must have been 10 or 11, we were picking up Mom from RDU. Back when you could go to the gate, we could not find an upward escalator to take. So we ran up a downward escalator until we were met by TSA agents who assertively informed us how to get to the gate. Devoted, loving, steadfast, those words don't begin to describe his loyalty to Diane. I remember the historical snowstorm of 2000. One of Mom's prescriptions ran out. With the roads in town blanketed by 2 feet of snow and ice, we couldn't drive. Dad and I walked roughly 10 miles in knee-deep snow to get to the Kroger before they closed. He was a rock. He was always there for me, sometimes to a fault. Though some of the problems I faced when I was younger, he was always there. Good times and plenty of bad. He never wavered. As you all know, community theater was his life. It was his reason. It kept him sane after Diane had a stroke in 2008. He was always there to help if he wasn't doing 3 other productions. Such passion, such vigor for life and drama and emotion. He would tell stories or explain a bit of Shakespearean dialogue to me. He would tear up telling me storyline, the why informs how layers of dramatic change, how people can change and choose the good. His eyes would light up, along with a big smile and hug, every time he saw you. I miss those hugs and those stories, but we shall carry on. Because there are plays to be written and plays to be read, pints to be had and jokes to be said. And on a bad day or good, memories will stay in our head, and we can smile and recall, I remember Fred. This is my good buddy Cameron McVeigh playing me on banjo. He also was a good friend of my dad. We used to go to O'Malley's for breakfast sometimes. I've been stuck here in a bad place. It's been hard to hide a sad face. Just pictures left on mom and dad's face. The world's moving at a fast pace. I just wish I had some more time. Didn't squander all that was mine. I called more to hear you doing fine. I didn't know it was the end of the line. There's a teardrop in my face mask. Sweet memories of days past, running like horses through my mind, searching for comfort that I cannot find. And it's almost been a month since withdrawal pains from the substance, relied on it day by day. Please God, don't let the memories fade away of Diane and Fred, Diane and Fred. But the days are getting better. Say farewell to colder weather. Diane and Fred, Diane and Fred. There's too many words for one song. I could write about y'all all day long, but maybe this could be a stepping stone. 'Cause it's still hard to walk into the home of Diane and Fred, Diane and Fred. Thank you all.
I first met Fred doing some plays with Faith Theater in Cary, and he would come up to me after a couple of shows I was in. Had such nice things to say, and it was, you know, I'm one of those rare actors that has self-confidence problems sometimes. So it was just really nice to have this guy say such nice things to me. And I think it really bolstered my confidence. And of course, then I started seeing him more and more outside of theater through mutual friends, Bert and Phil, so on, and ended up going to lots of parties at their house and meeting all of their family and friends, having so many good times. The the one anecdote that I wanted to tell you guys about was the time that I was in the Diary of Anne Frank here at Burning Coal. I played Mr. Von Don. We played that on the second floor here. See it? We actually built the second floor with scaffolding in here. The audience and everybody was upstairs, cramped in the attic with the lights right on top of us. It was fantastic. And so there was one show I couldn't be in. I couldn't attend, and so they agreed to let me play the part, but they got Fred to understudy me and take on the role that night. So, you know, this is the dedication he had. You know, he would help out in a pinch for so many different theater productions. So he learned the lines, and he came to some rehearsals, and he came to performances to watch my blocking and watch what I did. And then we had the one rehearsal before the weekend that, you know, that he was going to be playing the role. And what we did is we went through the entire rehearsal, and he just stood behind me and followed me. You know, walked around with me all through the lobby for the entire play. I had this guy behind me, you know, he's still there. I haven't lost him yet. And so, yeah, it was such a great experience to work with him in that play. And of course, he did a great job. Almost too good a job. I think I was hearing more about his performance. Anyway, but yeah, I still kind of like to think that maybe he's still following me around, walking behind me when I need him. So I have one other thing I'd like to do here. That is, there's a kind of there's a celebrity that Fred was friends with that he roomed with at UNC for a while. His name is Louis Black, the comedian. And I contacted Louis Black's publicist and agent, and lo and behold, he emailed me back saying, sure, he'd like to participate in this. Can't be here in person, but he did send me a little textual tribute that I want to read to you guys. Okay. Okay, so this is, he wrote a lot of other stuff too. He was sort of on a rant, what a surprise. But this is what I can say. I am deeply saddened that I cannot join you all today for this memorial for the wondrous spirit named Fred Corlett, and to hear your tales of the life he led, because I had only shared a small part of it. And what I remember most is that he was one of the sweetest, gentlest, kindest, and joyful people I have known. I was lucky our lives crossed because I feel knowing Fred made me a better person. I am sorry that I didn't see him more as we grew older. His passing only makes that loss I feel much deeper. I believe the heavens are bettered by your presence, my friend.
I'm Mary Raleigh. And I am a multi-generational Southerner. And so I know the rules, which are you're not supposed to wear white after Memorial Day. Now, I've been known to stretch that because frankly, I think Easter's fine. But the reason I'm wearing white today is because in honor of Fred and Diane, I feel like this is probably what they got. So there's that. And there's another reason. Which has to do with one of the things that Fred and I did together. We were in a lot of different shows together, but one of the most fun things we did together was the 10 and it gave us the opportunity to play together. And one of the first plays in the 10 by 10 we were in together was called It's What's for Dinner. And he played Granny Mac in a wheelchair with like moldy noodles all over him. Very cheerfully. And I was French brie. This was part of our costume. So he was my husband multiple times. How many people can say that? Not make Diane jealous. He was my father. He was my brother. He was my enemy. He was my victim. He was my doctor. And so much more over the course of time. And I just wish I had the opportunity to keep adding to that list.
Hi, I'm Lindsay. I'm going to start this off by saying I used to be terrified of public speaking, so Fred would be thrilled to see me up here today. He was an amazing human being. Unlike, I know the majority of you know him through theater, but I met him at my very first job at college, at DDS. I was 21 years old, I was terrified, and most of the office was a clique and they didn't like me. And he was so sweet and so nice, and I just remember being so relieved when he talked to me. And that kindness continued over 17 years that we knew each other. He was like a father to me in every conceivable way, a second father. He was always there when I needed someone to talk to. If I wanted to go see a movie on short notice, Fred was ready to go. He loved to see the movies, and then we'd eat afterwards and we'd dissect everything. And I could talk his ear off and he wouldn't get annoyed at me because I'm one of those people who talks and doesn't listen enough. And he would tell me about all of you, and I have so many names and no faces. You were his world and you were his life. But there were so many things he taught me, both him and Diane, because they're interchangeable in my mind, because I knew them outside of theater, I think. His devotion to her defined him, and her devotion to him defined her. And they taught me to be a better person. They taught me to be more selfless and thoughtful. And any time that I needed something, he was there. The most poignant story, indication of that is I had to go to DC for a year to get a job in the federal government. And you think, oh, I'll start over, it'll be normal and easy, I'll just make new friends. Well, DC is expensive, and the federal government does not pay much. And I was lonely and scared and sick. I've had Crohn's my whole life, and I had no one. And he would call me several times a week. He sent me postcards with long messages on them, and he sent me care packages. He and my mother were all I had that year in DC, and I was in the hospital 3 times. He called. He would call to make sure I got the care packages, and I can remember getting each one and holding it, and what a wonderful experience it was to just know that somebody cared enough about me to take the time and the effort to do something so thoughtful. And that's who Fred was. He was a friend, he was a father, he was a brother, he was, and he taught me to appreciate what I had instead of what I didn't. And that's really just what I wanted to share with you.
Well, Lindsay, don't feel strange that public speaking makes you scared. There was a poll taken of Americans a few years ago where they asked what is the thing that frightens you the most in the world, and public speaking was the #1 thing on the list. Death was #2. True story. First of all, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming, and for the many artists in this room who have blessed this room with their work. Thank you for that over the years too. We really appreciate it. Nothing I will say will be a surprise to anyone. Everybody here knew Fred and knew him in the same way, but I'm going to say a couple of things about him that struck me. One of them is that he didn't seem to know the meaning of the word no. Whenever I asked him to do anything, he said yes, and he never said, how many lines does it have? How many scenes does it have? Is it the leading role? He literally never asked any of that. He just said, when are rehearsals, and let's go. And it wasn't just theater too. I would call him if I had tickets to a rock concert, which I used to go to back before the pandemic. My wife would be out of town traveling or something, and I'd call up Fred and say, I got tickets to see The Boss. Do you want to go? And yeah, when do we go? And can I just say that you haven't rocked out until you've rocked out to The Boss with Fred Corlett. I'm not kidding. That is That is an experience most of you will never have the opportunity to enjoy. So yeah, he didn't, you know, he loved saying yes, which is an extraordinary thing about a person. The second thing is that because of that characteristic, perhaps, he worked with all of us. And when Simi and I were first thinking about starting a theater somewhere, one of the big worries that we had, because people kept telling us this, is that a lot of communities, if you work at one theater, you don't work at the other theater, and we did not find that here at all when we got here, and we were kind of pleasantly surprised. And I'm looking back on it and wondering if one of the reasons for that might have been Fred's generosity and willingness to work with anyone and everyone. And the last thing that I wanted to say about Fred is that he, you know, I guess it's fair to say that he was never angry. Even when he was angry, he seemed happy. He seemed happy about it somehow. Am I right about that? Did anybody ever see Fred really mad? I never did. And he'd be talking about, you know, I won't mention certain past presidents, for instance, and he would be just so joyous and upbeat as he tore into them. And that's an extraordinary skill, and one that I have failed miserably in my life to live up to. Even when I'm happy, I seem angry. So Fred, I miss you. I will miss you. We all will miss you, and we all learned from you. And so thank you, Fred.
When I think of Fred, the first thought that pops into my mind is actually Fred and Diane. Several years ago, Fred asked me to be one of Diane's caretakers. As has been mentioned, she had a stroke and needed someone to stay with her while he was in rehearsals for the many shows in which he performed. When I met Diane, I thought so highly of Fred for choosing her to be his life partner. Staying with Diane was always a joy. She was so intelligent, so curious, so articulate. Our conversations ranged from religion to genetics to the latest TV shows we had seen on Netflix. When Fred got home after rehearsal, we would get a thorough report about how rehearsal went. Usually it went very well, especially if it was at burning coal. More than once, Fred would share his wisdom on being an effective actor. I am better for his sharing. The duo of Fred and Diane was one of two incredible people who supported each other's dreams and aspirations and didn't count the cost. So as I remember Fred, what I remember is the loving union of Fred and Diane.
Hi everybody, my name's Jerry Lynn. I'm glad to be here. I was speaking to Lindsay in the lobby before we all came in here and gathered, and she was telling me some of those stories that she shared with you. And I said to her, you know, I've been to memorials before for people, and it's not until we come into these rooms and we share, we hear these stories, that we know the many facets of a person. The stories she told, I didn't know that of Fred. I knew he's a gracious, generous, wonderful human being, but he sent her care packages for a year. He sent her postcards and called her this lonely girl far away from home. And we don't know those stories. We all have stories, and we all know just a sliver of each other. And we only know each other more when we come here. I wish we could know each other better now. Anyway, thinking about Fred, I was lucky enough to cast him in 10 by 10 for a number of years, and he was a great actor for 10 by 10 because our 10 actors had to play multiple roles in multiple plays, so you got to see a facet of an actor's ability. And he was a consummate actor. He could have you in stitches in one play and tugging at your heartstrings in another in the span of 15 minutes, you know, from one play to another. Great actor. And we all know that. We've all worked with him in these rooms, those of us that have, and we know how generous he was and how giving and willing to jump in, whatever it was. Yes, I'll do it, I'll try it, let's do it. Never reticent. But the one image that really I have when I think about Fred and Diane is watching them interacting with other people. I just have this seared in my memory when I thought about speaking, is him leaning over her chair, her wheelchair, speaking to another person, and how wrapped they both were in that other person. How like 100% they were in conversation and fellowship with that person. They were laughing, they were generous with themselves, and it was that person in front of them that was the entire world. Chaos could be going on, but they were focused on that person. And it seems like the stories that I'm hearing right now, that's kind of the essence of who they were. Whatever was in front of them, they were 100% there. They weren't reticent, they were gracious and generous. I want to be that way, and I would, if there's anything that I can walk away with, my time of knowing Fred and Diane is that graciousness to give to others. Thanks.
Am I mispronouncing it?
No, maybe I just don't know my name. We're gonna go with that one. And the reason why maybe I shouldn't even be up here. Did you say Donald?
Yes.
So I remember Fred, apparently not. So first time I met Fred, Jerry was directing Written on the Heart, and I was in it. That was the first time I met him. I had only been in theater for about 2 years at the time, no formal training. One day I decided I wanted to try theater and audition and stuff. And so I'm thinking I want to get to know as many people as I can. So we've had a few rehearsals. And so I come in one rehearsal and I'm speaking to people and trying to, remember people. And I look at Fred and I said, "Hey, George." Fred said, "No, it's Fred." So I didn't speak to Fred anymore. I felt like just crawling into one of these cracks.
He was a very handsome man.
Oh, why y'all let him in? So, in Written on the Heart, Jerry had 23 people in there, including George and Fred. So, everybody else in the play spoke English, except me. And I spoke Flemish. I still don't think that's a language. I think that's something Jerry made up. So I'm frustrated in rehearsals, and I go in the back and I'm sitting down, and Fred comes to me and he says, "Are you all right?" And I'm like, I'm not getting this. And he looked at me and said, "Get out of your head." And he said, "Get out of your head, get out of your own way. You can do this. You have this." And I said, "But Fred," I said, I'm speaking Flemish and I'm not sure if I'm doing it right and I can't necessarily remember. He leaned into me and said, "Everybody else is speaking English. They ain't getting it right either." At that point, Fred became something that I actually haven't heard anyone say here. He became a teacher. And he may not know it, but he became a teacher for me. I said, "I don't want to do this. Okay. And I was terrified. I was terrified about theater and terrified about acting. And I watched his every move. I might not have followed him behind him, Tom. I probably got in trouble with Jerry a few times because every time he was on the stage and he was saying his lines, I was in his mouth. I was just like, okay, let me watch him and let me learn. And then he did Dark Side with me. And I was kind of like a little dog, like, because Dark Side was a dark comedy, and I thought Fred was like Shakespeare Jr. And I didn't think he would do anything like that. And he did it, and did it well. And there were times when he would say, I can't be at rehearsal. I have to take care of my wife. And he did that well as well. But he never missed a rehearsal because he was tired. Because, he was juggling several things. He was always present, not just there, but he was present. And he wasn't pushy with giving advice, but he would give you advice. But when we were in Dark Side, we would be, it was this big elaborate steel set. And during the show, we're behind the set. Fred is the comedian. He's the one making us laugh before we go out with lines. And I'm like, I got to say some lines, will you be quiet? And he's just back there cracking and making jokes. So that's the Donald that I choose to remember. So I'm glad to be here. Thank you, Kurt. Yeah.
I'm Kurt Benrud, and I remember Fred Corlett as someone who was always among my first choices of who to include in any activity. Didn't matter what it was. If he could come, he would. And he was always enthusiastic, no matter what we were doing. Here in the Triangle, we went to such things as plays, concerts, lectures, movies, jam sessions. On occasion, we would go on what he used to call a road trip. In fact, I remember the first time I said, hey, you want to go with me to such and such? And he said, road trip! And we'd go to Stanton, Virginia for the American Shakespeare Center, or we go to Leesburg, Virginia for the Potomac Celtic Festival, or we go to Asheville, Greensboro, High Point. Pilgrimages is what these were for us. Sometimes it would be just me and Fred, and sometimes locally we'd have a car full of people. Deborah, you might remember the night you sat in the back seat between Matt Halprin and somebody else. So you don't have to answer. Anyway, most frequently back in the day, it was me and Phil and Fred. Phil, of course, being Phil Lewis. And could we ever talk a load of hogwash? At some point, and this was guaranteed, either Phil or I would make some type of random, wise-ass comment. Within a matter of seconds, the other one would counter it with something related, but still as random and as wise-assed. Now, the gauntlet, you see, had been thrown down. We might only get one round in, or sometimes we'd get a few rounds before, and this next thing was also guaranteed, Fred would swoop in and thoroughly trump everything that Phil and I had said with the ace of spades of wiseassity. On another note, I recall when I called the Corlett residence. You remember this? I used to call a residence. I called the Corlett residence, landline to landline, if you want to get this in the time frame here. And Diane answered, and she and I spoke for a few minutes, and eventually she asked me if I wanted to speak to Freddie. Okay, I just told her yes, and proceeded to let her know that I was going to invite him to join me for one of these road trips. And she replied, of course he'll go. These trips are good for him. I was glad to know that. Now, Fred described himself as a Luddite. He did eventually was a latecomer to the world of email and cell phones. He claimed, however, to be technologically challenged. And there was another time back in those days when I called. Diane told me he was not home and she offered to take a message. Now I said that'd be fine, but would she prefer that I save her some trouble by calling back and putting a message on the answering machine? She said no, he wouldn't get that because he doesn't know how to turn it on. Yeah. So me and Phil and Fred, a common sight in the lobbies of Triangle area theaters. And if only two of us were spotted, it was usually because the other one was actually in the show. One time, however, that was not the case. Jack Hall had given Fred 2 comps to the show. And Fred shared one of them with me, so it was just us 2. At the reception afterwards, we wanted to thank Jack for the tickets and to let him know we'd enjoyed the show. As we approached him, Jack extended his hands and asked, "Where's Phil?" We didn't know. Some of my best memories of Fred are of play readings we used to have early in the 21st century. Sometimes at my house, sometimes Fred's, Judith's, or Andrea's. She can raise her hand if she wants to. Sometimes at a restaurant or a bar. At Shakespeare, Stoppard, Miller, O'Casey, everything was fair game as long as we could get multiple copies with nobody having to buy anything. And then we moved on to the world of local playwrights. And we would have readings, sometimes from various ones. Our friend Lydia Spityakov would point us towards people that could help us accumulate scripts. And one night, Fred hosted the complete works of Brook North. This was back in the day when the North Canon was still small enough to fit into one evening. And most of these were 10-minute plays always, the occasional 9 or 11, you know, that kind of a thing. Well, as with most people that I know, and I've been hearing it here tonight, or this afternoon rather, I can say, we met while doing a show. And Fred and I met in the 90s while rehearsing Romeo and Juliet at Theater in the Park. At the initial table reading, David Wood, the director, introduced everybody. When he got around to Fred, he told us that this was going to be the 3rd time that he and Fred had worked together on a production of Romeo and Juliet. So naturally, during a break, this fellow that I just met, I've got to find out some details from him. And he could tell that I was interested in more than just, oh, I played this character this year, and I played this character this year. Now shut up and go away. Okay. I mean, he could tell I wanted more information than that. And he had entertaining stories to share about both of those shows. And he left this audience wanting more. Anytime Fred told stories, you're ready to pull up a chair and listen to some more. Well, when did I first realize he was special? It was during an early rehearsal of Romeo and Juliet. Still didn't know each other very well, but this was one of those long rehearsals on a Saturday where you rehearse for a while, you take a break for lunch, everybody goes away, you come back an hour later, and you rehearse again. And I have no idea what was bothering me that day, but I was not myself, okay? Not myself, and because I was not myself, I just kind of moved away and went someplace to have lunch by myself. Well, before long, I don't know how he knew where I had gone, but he joined me at the table with his attentive ear, I guess is the right word to say here. He's not intrusive, not nosy in the least, but sympathetic. And I don't know how he managed to steer the conversation in a new direction, or how he knew what direction it ought to be steered to. Because you see, my heart very seldom makes its way to my sleeve. And, but he was perceptive enough, empathetic enough, and patient enough to make it so that soon the world and I were back at peace. And I definitely enjoyed the second half of that rehearsal much more than I might have. Well, I've since witnessed and heard about other occasions on which he rescued other friends from whatever demons they may have been fighting. The man knew how to be a friend. I'm proud to say that he was my friend. Sorry. I really treasure the memory of a conversation in which he referred to me as his best friend. I know we never saw each other in person after the first few months of last year. And I have to admit, our phone calls, text messages, and emails got sparser and sparser. Among the last text messages I got from him, in which he revealed that he'd contracted COVID but was optimistic about his chances of full recovery, he said, "Best case scenario, we'll watch the Super Bowl together again this year." Well, I'm sure that I'm not alone here when I say he is still with us. People that we met through him are still our friends. For me, conversations that he and I had over the years still influence things that I say and do. Now and then I mentally bump into something that I find interesting and catch myself making a semi-conscious mental note to discuss it with Fred. The other day I was ransacking the cupboard in the kitchen looking for a spare jar of a spice I needed, and I came across a box of sugar-free cookies and a bag of sugar-free candy. And he had told me a few years back that, except for Diane, I was the most conscientious about making sure that we always had snacks for him. Well, I don't know how true that is. Well, not necessarily, because you, along with me, have witnessed on more than one occasion Ken Walsh baking a sugar-free pie or a sugar-free cake to have there for dessert because Fred was going to be there. And that's one of my points here, is that we were and are a community in which Fred was and is a presence. For all of us richer because we can say, I remember Fred.
I must apologize to Fred because I'm not off book tonight. I should have been. I wrote this thing about like 2.5 months ago. And of course, you know, Kirk has already used all my good material, so they put something else in here in the meantime. The world each one of us inhabits is not so much defined by geography as by our culture, our values, and most importantly, by our friends. Now, it is within this landscape that we live and move and have our being. If we are fortunate, we have friends whose presence makes our world welcoming, enjoyable, and worthwhile. They are the salt which brings out the savor of an otherwise bland but nourishing dish. Such a person was Fred Corlett. I met Fred through my participation in community theater sometime around 1995. Although we had met socially through my friend Kurt, I first worked closely with Fred when he directed me in the play Good at Raleigh Little Theater. Now, as a director, Fred was always encouraging. He did not see an acting choice as bad or wrong. Rather, he would say, let's try it another way and see how it works. Or, now, if you were in this situation, what would you do? This type of helpful and supportive interaction was not simply a tool he employed for the purpose of directing. It was an integral part of him as a person. Away from his directing chores, he always, and I'll repeat, always, spoke highly of actors and how they worked and how they learned from their efforts. I remember Fred speaking very highly of a set designer he taught in high school who created an illusion of an object melting on a table. Now, Fred said he'd never seen such a brilliant bit of stagecraft before or since, amateur or professional. He loved talent. He loved to see people succeed. And Fred was eager to be impressed by others, in theater and out. I remember him praising a young woman, as it turns out, Emily Raleigh, who had directed him locally, genuinely referring to her as a genius. Now, there wasn't a single note of jealousy in that, just a pure love of excellence. How wonderful it was to experience his delight in others. Now, Fred enjoyed humor in many forms, and, well, if he hung around with Kurt and me, he jolly well had to. But the best thing about us three jokers was that the humor was never mean-spirited or critical or judgmental. It was humor which recognized the silliness and general foolishness common to us all of us mere mortals. And puns, oh good Lord. Now, I know Kurt has already told you my stories here, but during trips to Stanton, Virginia with Kurt and Fred and me, the puns would often be flowing fast and furious and deep, especially between me and Kurt as we picked the low-hanging fruit of the pun possibilities. And then Fred would contribute something that would leave us totally speechless. And we would bow to the master, well played, Fred, well played. I remember one, this is sort of off the cuff, but I remember one trip where it was Kurt, Fred, David, and myself. We were traveling up there. I think we had heard a rather grim prognosis about Rosencrantz and Guildenstern or something like that. And we were going to check on him. But as we were going out Highway 50, we passed by, I think it was the Shriners Club. And there was a tall statue there of a man wearing a fez that had a child on his shoulder with a crutch. And we had already been in the midst of some kind of hogwash, and we all went and looked at the statue as it went past the windows. And Fred said, "We'll talk about that later." and David thought that was the most hilarious thing he had ever heard. And I looked at David and thought, yeah, David's all right. He's going to fit right in. Now, there were many things that Fred was not. He was not physically imposing, not rich, nor a captain of industry, nor politically connected. Things often used to define importance. What he was kind, supportive, empathetic, joyful, charitable, and filled with integrity. He was a genuinely good person. He was a rare spice whose presence turned the everyday into a feast. He was my friend, and I shall miss him greatly.
Hi, I'm Brooke, for you don't know me, and I had a plan of what I was going to say before I came up here, and I think it's a little out the window. I'm going to cry, and that's okay. I mean, Fred and Diane were as Kurt mentioned, they were the first people to host my writing as a body of writing, and it was at their house, so Diane could participate, and a lot of people here were there as well, and that was something that was really special to me. It made me feel like a writer, and like that what I had to say was worth hearing and listening to and appreciating, and that was a gift that they both gave me, and I'm really grateful to both of them for that. Fred was such a wonderful person to act with. He and I remember when he was playing my younger brother, as part of As You Like It. And we shared a dressing room, and we would talk about Shakespeare for hours, like before the show, and as we're getting ready, And about other actors in the area, and about other shows we had seen, and about many people who are in this room today. We talked about you. and I promise you, not once did he ever say anything negative, never anything critical, never anything, not that he was lying. It was that he was, but the truth that he always saw and that he always brought was one that was full of appreciation and love for craft and for hard work and for the moment, because everyone has a moment of brilliance, and that was something that I think I've seen and heard, and like what people have shared already as like everything's like I'm remembering this about him and this thing that he did, and it was so, he would always so supportive as an audience member. I mean, he would go to everything. Many of you probably know that I produced a lot of shows, and he came to, I think, every single one. And he was always an audience member that was incredibly enthusiastic. If you were in the cast, if you went to a show with him, and always had nothing but beautiful things to say. Because I'm sure it's not because he thought that everything that everyone did was brilliant. Although I like to think that about me. But because he saw what he chose to see was the good. And that was something that was incredibly special about him. So I brought this. I don't know if this is a good idea, but he did love Shakespeare so much. So I'll do this because I brought it. This is Sonnet 30. When to the sessions of sweet silent thought I summon up remembrance of things past, I sigh the lack of many a thing I sought, and with old woes new wail my dear time's waste. Then can I drown an eye unused to flow for precious friends hid in death's stateless night, and weep afresh love's long since cancelled woe, and moan the expense of many a vanished sight. Then can I grieve at grievances forgone, and heavily from woe to woe tale o'er the sad account of forebemoaned moan, which I new pay as if not paid before. But if the while I think on thee, dear friend, all losses are restored, and sorrows end. Thanks.
I would be remiss, haunted, if I didn't say to you that one time when Fred was at my house, sitting at the table, he said, "At my last, I want someone to say," repeat after me, you all Shakespearean actors, "Good night, sweet prince. May flights of angels sing thee to thy rest." Fred.
Hi guys, I'm Maggie, or Meg, as most of you know me. I'm just going to be reading what I wrote, and I hope that it's good enough. So, let me get started. Let me begin by saying I am sorry. Fred deserves so much more than I am capable of producing. I wish that I could write something beautiful. I wish that I could sing a touching song. I wish I could honor all the belief and the pride that he had in me with something as wonderful as all my memories of him. But the truth is that I am weak since he has gone. I haven't been able to write a story or a poem since his curtain call. So I'm sorry that this missive will not be the standard he deserves, though I will try my best. In fact, Fred was my loudest cheerleader. From 16, he told me constantly that I was a fabulous writer. He encouraged me every step and told me that my stories and poems deserved to be read. Even the silly little e-books that I wrote with his encouragement ended up winning the 2020 Reader's Choice Awards in their category. I was floored, and Fred was unsurprised. He expected others to see what he saw. Fred was the only person in the whole world, in my whole life, who told me that I had a nice singing voice. He loved to hear me sing, even though it wasn't special at all. He said that the joy and the feeling that came when I sang made my singing good. He never cared that all the notes were wrong. And I don't tell you this to brag. I'm not sharing for pity over my loss of my personal cheerleader. I'm sharing because I know that I'm not the only one who got this treatment. Fred was the king of support. I have heard stories, read letters, and even met people whom he gushed over. Some who he described so excitedly that I imagined them like celebrities. People he believed in passionately and would support devotedly in any possible capacity. I have never met Emily Rainey, but I have heard her name and about her work so much from Fred that I feel like I do know her. I've never met his son David face to face, but I know so many wonderful things about him through his doting father. Julie Oliver and I have met once at a party in 2009, but I've heard countless reports of her amazing talent over the past decade, so much so that 2009 doesn't seem very far away. I'm saying I am not alone, but rather a member of a very lucky group of people who were blessed by his passionate optimism and confidence in us. I am but one of many whom he loved. Fred was a living lesson in love. Romantic love, familial love, friend love, and even just loving strangers for being human. He knew how to love well under any circumstance. Everything I know about love I learned from him. I learned that real love doesn't require an answer or reciprocation. If you really love someone, you require nothing of them, but you treasure what they give you. He taught me that the best way to love was through action. Acts of devoted love and pure kindness were the best ways to love people, and everyone deserves kindness. On my husband's first visit to North Carolina, he's Korean, Fred and Diane sang a duet of Consider Yourself to let him know that he was now part of the family. He and Diane gave us so much good advice in the first year of my marriage. Don't say anything that's only hurtful. Make sure your choices have love behind them. Remember that you love each other even when you're angry. Never act out of anger. And be each other's best friends. My husband and I strive to be like them. Fred once told me that he realized early in their relationship that Diane was incapable of accepting praise or compliments, that she just didn't see herself that way. So he decided to never ever stop praising her, just in case one day maybe something would sink in. We would all be so lucky to have someone see our weaknesses, accept them, and fortify us with even more love. What a world that would be. I'm sorry that this is just a list of information and not the beautiful poetry or songs that he deserves. I'm sorry that the best I can do is share and say that I am so happy that I am not the only one who knew this amazing man. I'm sorry that the world is now without him, but thankful that we are not without his influence. I will continue to spend my life trying to love as Fred did, and I hope we all can. Be well. I love you all, and hopefully I'll see you someday soon. Bye.
You'll have to forgive me. Kurt kind of caught me coming in the door, so I've had to put a little something together here on the fly. But anyhow, I am John Rossi, and I knew Fred as a co-worker for probably over 20 years. He, Lindsay Moore, who you heard speak at the beginning, and I did lunch just about every Wednesday for at least 10 years. Even after Fred and I both retired from the state, we still kept meeting Lindsay and that. It was always a great time. Anyhow, most of you, of course, know Fred, the actor. Let me tell you about the other Fred, the sports fan. In 2015, we wanted to get Fred and Diane out of the house. So we took Fred and Diane and Lindsay down to Anna Maria Island, which is south of Tampa, just for reference there. Amazingly, we all got there. Let's just say never use Fred and directions in the same sentence. Unknown to me, this was the week of the NBA championship games. I know this went over well with my wife and Diane. Anyhow, Fred went on and on with info on players and stats throughout the game. Anyhow, I'll miss watching these games and plays here, such as the 10 by 10 and so on, plays here. Fred was a once-in-a-lifetime friend and is missed. Thank you all.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Rudolph.
And I'm Larry Evans.
And we're here together today because the two of us worked with Fred on Raleigh Little Theater's Diary of Anne Frank.
The Diary of Anne Frank was the first time I worked with Fred, and I was excited to work with him because I had so much respect for him as an actor. Anytime we had a moment alone, I would talk to him about the craft of acting. He was very patient listening to me and answering my questions. I told him very often how I was frustrated about the roles I was getting in my early 40s. And he gave me some tips and some ideas and ensured me that he became a better actor in his 50s and the roles got much better. And Fred was right.
I do remember from the first rehearsal to strike were only 56 days. But to the cast, they were 56 days that totally changed our life. The cast bonded very quickly because of the subject matter and how intense it was. And the fact that the 8 of us were actually living together in this little annex that Rick Young had built every single night at rehearsal. The one funny story I remember about Fred is the set had the Franck bedroom way downstage, maybe 5 feet from the audience. One night during rehearsal, Haskell gave us both a note. And he said, you know, the two of you, when you are changing on the stage, which is what we had to do because we had to be on the stage the entire show. When you're changing your clothes, you tend to turn upstage so that the audience doesn't see you. But that is suggesting that you know that there's an audience there. So we don't want you to do that. So both Fred and I looked at each other and we said to Haskell, okay, we're not turning upstage because we're shy or modest. It's because it's the only chance we have to talk to each other and say, what scene is next? What dress do I put on? What did I do with my shoes? So it was just a really funny little moment that Fred and I had all the time.
The story I just told you about Fred, I've actually told that story 100 times to younger actors and older actors. I've always talked fondly of Fred over the years and how much our friendship during Diary of Anne Frank meant to me.
And Larry, you and I had been in the Diary of Anne Frank before as young people.
Right.
So it was very special to us to be able to get a chance to do the show again as different characters. And we just loved the kind of the fatherhood that, Fred brought to the
Right.
role and to all of us. And like you said, leading us in the direction of a family. And he always had a smile on his face whenever he saw us. And I miss him dearly. And it was a wonderful experience to be able to be in that show and play his wife. So
And we'll always remember his final scene.
not without tears.
Right.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Fred.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Benji Jones. I don't remember when I met Fred. I don't remember exactly what it was. It might have been Oakwood. It might have been this very strange Greek weird thing we did together right here, which I'll get back to at one point. I don't remember, sorry, when we would unexpectedly meet and his little face would light up with joy just to see me. I don't remember when I was given that gift, but I am so grateful for that unconditional joy that he allowed me to give him, and he shared with me. And I think he's shared with everyone in this room in just a variety of unique ways. I want to thank Fred for being kind of instrumental in my living here in this theater community. We did this weird thing, I'll talk about that, but he kind of allowed me to fly here. I met him after 2008. I'd done some acting again, and I'd had kids, and we know what that happened, how that works. And I started, I took a class here, and Ian was like, "Oh, you can do Oakwood." Okay. I was like, "Can I do more things?" And I got this show, we'll talk about that. And then I got this an email from Fred Corlett. I think I got an email that said, there's this audition going on for what's it called in there? A rep of Hamlet and Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. You should go audition for Gertrude. And I did, and now I know all of you because Fred said that to me, and he said, "Go fly," and you always knew he was there to catch you, and that gets me back to that weird Greek hodgepodge thing that was called "Flee This Place," and it was Medea mixed with Antigone, mixed with the underworld, mixed with purgatory. And we were right here, kind of where this stage was, and it was basically the size of this light. It was surrounded, and chairs were surrounded by barbed wire, and there were these poles. It was experimental theater. There were these stands, and I was playing Medea. And it was very viewpoints, and Fred and viewpoints, that's another thing too, we could talk about that. But I was, the beginning of the show, there was this pedestal and there were these steps. It was completely not code, let's just be clear. It was completely. So I was on a pedestal about this tall, and the beginning of the show was this weird, crazy dance Medea thing, okay? And at the end of the dance, I'm supposed to spin and then walk down the stairs. Okay? And there's a show, and the other cast members are sitting around, and Fred is right there. And the stairs are here. And I spin, and I get lost. And I start to step off the pedestal for the stair, and I go this way. And Fred stands up to try to catch me. I didn't fall, but that's Fred.
Hi, I'm Ashley, and while I was listening to everyone, I thought of all these stories that I had to tell. And then I told myself to stick to one, don't ramble, because we are wanting to get out of here at some point. So what I really want to share is the last time I saw Fred. I had been in the hospital for almost a month, and the doctors didn't know what was wrong with me, but were preparing me for end of life. It was the summer I turned 30. And one day, I'm 40, so it was 10 years ago. And actually, it was mid-July 2010. So one of the procedures that actually ended up diagnosing me and allowing me to go home was rather painful, and I was not allowed any pain medicine for it. I wasn't even allowed a local. And so afterward, they said I could have as much as I wanted. So I went to sleep. And at one point, it was early afternoon, I woke up and Fred was sitting in a chair by my bed, holding my hands, just watching me. I was in and out, trying to explain, everything that was going on, and he never spoke back. He just let me in heavy breaths and my mind all over the place. He just let me speak to him. He just sat there for me. And I would fall back asleep. And when I would wake up, somewhat forgetting that he had been there, but somewhat remembering that someone was there, I would wake up maybe an hour later, maybe 10 minutes later, and he would be there holding my hand, watching me. And I remember that at some point, I woke up, he was holding my hand, I looked into his eyes, I didn't speak, he didn't speak, and in that moment, I felt his energy rushing into me. I felt at one with him, like a soul connection. And I felt the presence of God. I felt as if, even though he wasn't speaking a word, when I looked into his eyes, I felt him praying for me. I felt him giving me life through God. And though I have not seen him since then, when I heard that he had passed, actually not even that, when I heard that he was in the hospital and what was going on, my first thought was go to him. Hold his hand and look into his eyes, whether he opens his or not. But for very obvious reasons, I couldn't. And I thought, this is a man of God. This is a man who, through his very essence, gives that to every single person he meets. Before he came to that hospital room, I hadn't seen or spoken to him in a year. But he knew I was there, and he came to me. And when I heard that he had passed away, I felt heartbroken. Heartbroken, like I had lost my grandfather. Like I had lost someone that I spoke to every single day, who knew me in and out. Even though that's not the relationship he had with me on that day. It's the relationship that he had with me a decade earlier. I still felt it. And I decided last minute that I wanted to tell this story. I hope that by telling this to everyone, that when you think of him, when you picture him, when you see pictures of him, when you go and see shows that remind you of him, you too feel that essence. You know whether he is in heaven or he is here, that he is infusing energy into you. He is infusing light and positivity into you. And he is doing his best to give you the presence of God.
Mentor, a generous colleague, a loving friend. The thing that Fred always did, always, was lift us up. All of us, in every opportunity. I met him, I think, doing Henry V, and he played somebody who was in the English court, and he kept referring to the Dauphin as the Dolphin. And one of the other people in the cast, a girl who must have had a year of high school French, came up to him and that's not how the word's pronounced. And he so generously explained, I'm making fun of the guy. But in a way that didn't make her feel bad. That enhanced her understanding of Shakespeare, of the character, of the plot. I did another show with him, Merchant of Venice. The Merchant is the one who organized this today. And he played Shylock, and he was brilliant. He was so great. His understanding of the character was deep and profound and clever, different from anyone else I've ever seen play Shylock. I played Gratiano, for those of you who don't know, was the biggest anti-Semite in the show. And I think it was clever casting. You're covered if the Jew says that. Fred came up to me on the last night, and he said, "Isn't it ironic that you and I did this show together and I played Shylock?" Lifting us all up every time. The one that really sticks in my mind is that he came to see a play that Rebecca and I did, a show called Bojas. He was in the audience. It was, this was a theater company that did only Jewish themed stuff. And the director, Al Singer, heavily marketed it to temples and retirement communities. And we had an audience full of people who were just eating out of our hand. They loved it. And after the show, we went to a bar with Fred, and he said, you know, on a night like this, then he backed up and he said, there was a time when people would go to the theater, and afterward they would be so moved that they would riot in the streets. And it wasn't that long ago, and on a night like this, it's not hard to understand why. It was exactly the right thing. It stuck with me for years. I can hear him saying it, because he was lifting us up. He can't do that anymore. But we can. And we should. That's his legacy. Let's do right by him.
I'm Ken Walsh, for those who don't know me. I'm going to talk a little bit about the last year during the pandemic. Wasn't planning to speak today, but realized that maybe there is something to hear. Fred and Diane were both very important to me. I believe that Fred's probably the reason why I've been able to write some open cemetery plays. I've been invited to do that, but this last year was a little bit different because I was given the person to write about, and after the pandemic hit, the libraries were closed, there wasn't a way to contact people, we really didn't have things going on, but the character I chose actually ended up writing a story that involved him and some other things that just happened to happen at the same time at Broughton High School, right up the street, that Fred and Diane were there. So Fred and Diane were two of the people that I often shared my short scripts with, and they would share critiques with me and things like that. And y'all heard how difficult it was for Fred technologically, so we weren't going to talk on Zoom or go over the script on a screen or anything like that. This was an old-fashioned phone call with Fred and Diane. And what I realized that they actually knew some of the characters that I was talking about in the play and things like that they knew them in real life. And the key thing that came out of that was that Fred and Diane, listening to my script and things like that, I realized that what I had done was bringing them joy. And I think that's the message that I wanted to share with all of the acting community that's here today. And certainly with Lindsay and John, because as a caretaker for Fred and Diane, during many years, gosh, you don't realize how you don't realize how much you did for them. And everyone else who's spoken today, Fred and Diane would speak so highly of you, because what you have to realize is that Brooke hit on this a little bit, that they would filter the good out of everything that you were doing, and out of your performances and out of your rehearsals. And Fred would come home from every rehearsal and just so energized and so enthused. And he was enthused by what you had done for him, by you sharing your talents. He couldn't have been infused, he couldn't have been enthused without what you did. So recognize that what you did and what you have been doing and what you'll continue to do as the pandemic goes away are the things that brought life to Fred, and that brought that joy out and brought out that joyfulness. So that's really what I wanted to share with you, is just keep remembering that doing what you have been doing is such a way to bring people joy. Thank you.
I sure wish I could recall specific incidents with the same level of detail that Fred could when he shared events of his life. When I first met Fred, he was part of an awesome trio, which included Benrud, Phil Lewis, and of course Fred. These three gentlemen had a rare and refreshing dynamic, and together they were full of sharp wit, tall tales told for shits and giggles, and they were never short on perfectly articulating colorful stories to tell. It was truly a special treat to be seated at their table at any given bar after any given performance. It was also my special treat to have participated in an introductory directorial class led by Fred. He taught it with such passion and enthusiasm, and his unbridled encouragement left me feeling well empowered to accept my own directorial challenge. And Fred loved the theater, and he was in his element on stage. I loved watching him perform. Fred and Diane were very warm-hearted, very generous, good people. The two of them were kindred spirits, and I shared many special moments with them that I will always treasure. Fred and Diane, I miss you very dearly, but I still feel your presence here, because your memories will live on, along with the many lives of the people that I know you deeply touched. Rest in peace, Fred and Diane.
In the quirky way that I think it strikes me that Fred rhymes with friend, that the letters F-R-E-D are, if you take them out of friend, is left with I-N. Fred is in friend. And I thought it was really courteous of Fred to have his birthday today, because it's, Memorial Day weekend, so we can celebrate Fred in the context of the overall memory of everything that goes along with this weekend too. Finally, I think that Fred would take great humor and satisfaction in the fact that we are celebrating him today as we as a world are on the cusp of finally coming out of this horrible year plus the pandemic. And so it was so wonderful today to get together for one of the first times with a bunch of friends and people that I haven't seen in a long time, and see your faces, masks off, and have lots of hugs. And it's like, I think that he would appreciate that we celebrate his life in that way as we start to look for positivity going forward.
My name's Wayne. My collaboration with Fred was just a blip on the radar compared to a lot of you who've known him for years. But I had seen him on stage before I knew him, and it was right here. I saw a couple shows he was in. And then later on, Kirk contacts me and says, "Hey, listen, we have to do a 10 by 10 piece. We need someone to fill a position." And Fred's directing. I said, "Oh, I gotta get underneath this guy's teacher and directorship." And I said, "Okay, I'll jump at it." And I did that. And I just have one funny story about that time that he was trying to get me to fill this role and do it well. I had to play this character. It was a folklore legend tale called Old Jack Spooks the Devil, and I was on the very beginning just for a few minutes, and then my character takes a backseat for the rest of it. But I had to come up with this big guffaw, really hearty laugh, and I wasn't really getting there the way he wanted me to. But instead of getting on me about doing that, I'd be like, For 15 minutes, he's trying to push me in this direction. And all of a sudden, he stops and tells you something really, really funny, like an anecdote, and I'm like, where'd that come from? And then I realized, I wish I could remember what it was, but it was really, really funny. And the next thing I know, I'm like, and he went, that's it. So that's the kind of guy he was. And like I said, I only knew him for that one short show where he directed me in that short place. It was the 10 by 10. And I just wanted to share with you that he was that type of guy that would, he was never critical, but even in the criticism of trying to get you to where you needed to be on stage, he would sort of build you up in doing that, and that was always someone like that. I was just fortunate to work on it. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Much love to all the fans, friends, family members, and loved ones of the one and only Fred Corlett. I'm Emily Raleigh, a collaborator and admirer of Fred's. Fred and I did a lot of shows together. Or so I thought, until I went back and actually counted. It turns out we did 3 full-length shows together. The Love Song of J. Robert Oppenheimer, Much Ado About Nothing, and Brigadoon, a musical. It feels like more, however, because Fred's cheerful, warm-hearted presence was core to all things Burning Coal and the entire Triangle Theater scene. I remember a rehearsal with Fred in which he all of a sudden did a pratfall. Not the falling down kind, but the kind that's like a 3/4 somersault that takes you from standing to upside down and back to standing again. Fred did this gracefully, returning to standing entirely unruffled, which is possibly because of his super trendy suspenders with t-shirt and jeans look. He was ahead of the times. The room erupted in total surprise and delight, and Fred stuck the landing with a humble little ta-da gesture. And this is how I remember Fred, enthusiastically somersaulting through stories. I would walk up to him in rehearsal and mention something about the project we were working on, and Fred would vault into a seemingly unrelated story, double back through plot twists and turns, and arrive at the conclusion, having tied every thread together and related it back to the original idea. These moments left me with a greater understanding of theater and of humanity. They left Fred with a glint in his eye, as if it were a humble little ta-da gesture. Yet Fred's impact reached far beyond the Triangle. He would travel for art and community, great distances. I never personally ventured on any of the Burning Coal London trips, but I understand that Fred was a buoying force on many. And he journeyed once to Boston to see a show I had directed. That big gesture of his, executed with such loving humility, meant the whole world to me. Fred believed in me and all his collaborators, in our ability to somersault through the void, find meaning, and share with others all the generosity and exuberance that he has gifted us over the years. He gave us that nudge to share our story, and now it is our turn for Fred. Love you, Fred.
The first time that I managed to con Fred into directing one of my little 2-bit things that I used to do, I said, wow, Fred, you are a great director. And he said, I stand on great shoulders. I really liked that. There was another time I was asking him to direct a staged reading of something. And he said, not sure I've got time to do this. And I said, well, we're going to have Mary Rowland. He said, when do we start? And I'm going to finish up the night here by, I remember I said that I was playing music by artists that were at concerts, that we played concerts that Fred and I went to. And this is Natalie McMaster she's a Scottish fiddler from the Cape Breton, Nova Scotia, where the Scottish fiddling is so much more pure than back in Scotland because they haven't been in contact with anybody for a while. But Natalie McMaster is so quick at it that Fred said, when Natalie McMaster plays a quarter note, that's pretty much taking a coffee break. Okay, so I'm going to put on a CD that both of us obviously consider good because we both bought it. Usually we would buy, one of us would buy one of us would buy the other, and we would copy it, but don't tell anybody. But anyway, I'm going to let that play. I'm going to put the slideshow back on, and eventually I'm going to put away my toys and go home. Thank you all for coming.